The Phoenician Scheme is the latest film directed by Wes Anderson. It stars Benicio del Toro, Mia, Threapleton, Michael Cera, Scarlett Johansson, Bill Murray, Tom Hanks, Benedict Cumberbatch, Willem Dafoe, and many, many others. The film is centered around wealthy businessman Zaza Korda, who appoints his only daughter, a nun, as sole heir to his estate. As Korda embarks on a new enterprise, they soon become the target of scheming tycoons, foreign terrorists, and determined assassins. I've been pretty excited about this since it was first announced and promised myself to see it on the big screen as soon as it was released. In my time, I've only managed to see this and Wes Anderson's previous movie, Asteroid City, on the big screen, so I feel like it's always a privilege to be able to see the guy's movie in a cinema, and now, at the time of me recording this, it has finally released in my own country. So, how does it compare in the lineup of Wes Anderson's films? Well, I'll do my best to tell you. I'll start off with the performances, and I'll firstly talk about Benicio del Toro. I think the guy works really well as a leading man here. I thought in some of his early scenes there was the occasional moment where the guy leaned into a bit of overacting, which is saying a lot from a Wes Anderson movie, but there's a few occasions where he will shout some of his lines, and I was worried this was going to be his entire performance, but thankfully there was a lot more to it. Whenever the movie called for comedic moments, he handled it well and was funny. From other films I've seen him in, like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, he's no stranger to bringing some comedic moments, and it's still true in this movie. He isn't solely providing comedy in the movie though, as he's mainly presenting himself to have a cold exterior, which the screenplay calls for, and he pulls this off well too. Through the way he's able to talk to a lot of the characters in this movie, I felt he has a way of commanding his voice that kept me engaged for what he had to say. Mia Threapleton plays Korda's daughter. I found out not too long before seeing this movie that she is the daughter of Kate Winslet. She does a pretty good job here. While I haven't seen her other movies, I think she's still a pretty good actress. She adapts to the Wes Anderson style of acting pretty well, as she's able to deliver those notable deadpan line deliveries as if she's been a mainstay from his other films since the beginning. I think the chemistry between her and Del Toro's character was handled well. They worked off each other pretty well as this estranged father and daughter to a believable sense. Michael Cera plays Bjorn, who is brought in as this tutor for Del Toro's character, and I'm shocked it's taken this long for Michael Cera to be in a Wes Anderson movie in any capacity, as he fits right in so easily here. He is insanely funny, not just for the accent he has in this film, but for the way he delivers all of his lines. He presents himself to be awkward and quirky, and sometimes to an extent, with certain things he says, he could even come across as a little bit creepy, but not to the point where anyone would be disturbed watching his character. There is a turning point in this movie which makes his character go through some changes, which I obviously can't get into in this video to avoid spoilers. However, when this change comes, he remains to be really funny and shows this somewhat cooler side that only Wes Anderson can achieve. He was a delight to watch and always stole the scenes he was in whenever he was on screen. Scarlett Johansson kind of shows up for about 2 scenes, but I just found it funny that in this movie they made the choice to give her what I would call the Fargo accent, basically the same accent that Frances McDormand has in that movie. And yes, I'm well aware that it's an actual American accent of some state. I just always refer to it as the Fargo accent. I thought it was an interesting and funny choice for her to sound like this in the movie. Riz Ahmed is another example of an actor who has pretty good comedic chops in this film, which also isn't that big of a surprise since he's done other comedic roles in the past. But he did especially well regarding some physical comedy in a scene where a couple of characters, including Benicio del Toro, Tom Hanks, and Bryan Cranston, engage in a basketball match. All of these actors pull off some entertaining pieces of physical comedy and body mannerisms that either made me widely smile at least and laugh out loud at most. The plot in this film is somewhat unique in its concept, which is something that can be admired about Wes Anderson. While he has many tropes and a very distinctive style, the central plots in his movies always offer something new and creative, and at the same time, it presents a common theme which is seen in a lot of his films, which is the dysfunctional family. Only here, this time, it is extended to the father-daughter story, which I believe is the main heart of this story as a whole. It's engaging to see these two characters go through the tribulations together and see how they work off each other. One aspect of the plot I do have a complaint about, however, is the way this movie is structured. This movie has a very simple formula that has laid out quickly for you to understand, and once you get it, you see how a segment will begin and end, and then they kind of just repeat that same segment with the same lines in the same order, just with a twist of how to get out of a certain conflict, which got to be a little bit on the tedious side upon watching. In usual Wes Anderson fashion, the movie is split up into parts like chapters of a book or acts of a play, and this does make the slightly formulaic story more digestible. The character interactions for the most part are pretty fun and present some of the funniest moments in one of his more recent works. Wes Anderson does a good job at the director's chair and provides a concoction of a pretty funny and also pretty dark picture. This is how it's described as a black comedy. I was surprised to see him bring in some violence into this, which is natural for an espionage flick. The violence never becomes too intense or insanely graphic, so that's a major departure from what Wes usually does. But I was surprised at some things he added into it. It added a little bit of edge to his film. I think more and more he is teasing the idea of making a horror movie. I still stand by this theory, not just for the violence that's presented here, but there are certain moments through the lighting and cinematography towards the end of the film especially, where it could easily belong in a Wes Anderson horror movie. Part of me hopes it happens one day. All of the symmetry and deadpan deliveries that you can expect are also present here, which is nice to see. This movie is really well shot with the cinematography done by Bruno Delbonnel. This will be the first time Wes Anderson would not work with his usual cinematographer Robert D. Yeoman. I'm not entirely sure what the history is there, whether they had a falling out, or if the guy just wasn't available at the time of this film's production. This is proof, however, of how at this point in his career, how easily his style of cinematography can be created. There's segments in here that are filmed in black and white. With this and the production design in these parts of the film, it reminded me of the movie A Matter of Life and Death, which was very cool to see. It makes me curious if this was an inspiration when Wes Anderson was making this movie. A lot of staples that are usually seen are done here again, like long trucking shots from left to right or right to left, pans and tilts, along with one or two shots that wouldn't usually be in the guy's movies. There's a handheld shot here at one stage that I thought was done interestingly. All around, it's a real visual treat, which is to be expected at this point. I thought the production design in this movie was really nice, done once again by Adam Stockhausen, who's done the production design on a good few of Wes Anderson's works, and even won the Oscar for Best Production Design on the Grand Budapest Hotel. A lot of the sets looked great on the big screen, and a lot of his most recent films, Wes has started to hone in on making his movies look as if they could be plays, and that rings true with the combination of brilliant production design and cinematography to match. I thought the set for the plane was fun to look at, and a lot of the interiors to different buildings were another visual treat. Since this is set in the 50s, there's a lot of attention to detail in making these buildings look accurate to the time. I really like the music in this. The score is composed by Alexandre Desplat, who has done original music for Wes Anderson in the past, and has even won the Oscar for his music in the Grand Budapest Hotel. Notably, he also did the score for Fantastic Mr. Fox, which I find interesting as some of the music here sounded similar to some of the tracks that you would hear in that movie. When the scenes call for tense moments, it's mainly accompanied by a lot of drums. There is a scene in a jazz club, and the jazz instrumental that can be heard over this scene is a delight on the ears. For some of the more comedic and hopeful scenes that are in the movie, the music has the same whimsical tone that can be heard in Wes's other films. There were also pieces of classical music here as well, and when they were used over the scenes that they were put in, I thought they suited nice enough. They fit in well. Overall, I really like this movie. I would say it's somewhere in the middle of his filmography. It's not bottom of the barrel for sure, but it's not Anderson at his absolute peak. Out of his more recent works, I would say I prefer Asteroid City more. I feel like that movie goes more in depth with a great deal of subtext, and this picture focuses more on being its own story, which is nowhere near being a bad thing by any means. The runtime works for this type of film that it is. It's only an hour 40 minutes, and the way this movie is structured helps this runtime run as smoothly as it can. I'm giving the Phoenician Scheme 4 stars. It's a funny, thrilling, and visually great film that fans of both Wes Anderson and cinema in general will really get a kick out of. It's home to some enjoyable and memorable performances, a fun story which admittedly can get formulaic at times, which might be an issue for some people, but I think other aspects like the visual style for the picture makes up for it slightly. I'm not sure when the guy's actual peak will return, but it's nice to see that he's still consistently making good films. I recommend seeing this on the big screen at your local cinema if it's being screened at one, as it adds a lot to the experience, and It even feels like a treat. I'm always going to be excited to see a Wes Anderson film in the cinema, and I think if you have any interest in this and original movies in general, it's worth checking out.